The room fell silent before Zara Tindall even touched the clasp. Inside the small velvet box rested one of Queen Elizabeth's most personal emerald brooches, a jewel Camilla had quietly tried to secure for herself. But Zara did not carry it toward the Queen Consort. She crossed the room, stopped before Catherine, and placed the brooch into her hands, turning a private dispute into a devastating public rejection no one inside the palace could ignore. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Zara understood that the brooch carried a meaning no formal valuation could measure. Queen Elizabeth had worn it during intimate family occasions, not only at grand ceremonies, and that history made it a symbol of affection, continuity, and personal trust. A royal brooch was more than decoration when it passed through a family. It could preserve memory, signal approval, and reveal who had been trusted to carry part of the past forward. The private Windsor gathering had been expected to remain calm. Charles, William, Anne, Catherine, Camilla, and several senior relatives were present when Zara opened the box and formally offered the emerald piece to the Princess of Wales. The transfer was unmistakable. She was gifting the late Queen's jewel to Catherine and rejecting the earlier request made by the reigning Queen. Catherine did not close her fingers around it immediately. Her eyes filled as she told Zara that the brooch had belonged to her grandmother and should remain with Elizabeth's descendants. The princess was not refusing the affection behind the gift. She feared accepting something so personal might deepen a wound already forming across the room. Camilla stood several feet away beside an empty chair. Her prepared smile disappeared when Zara answered with quiet certainty. Grandmother would have wanted Catherine to wear it. The Queen understood that the sentence was not merely sentimental. It was a judgment delivered before the people whose silence would make the transfer impossible to dismiss. Days earlier, Camilla had privately approached Zara and argued that the brooch should pass to the reigning Queen. She believed wearing it would create visible continuity between Elizabeth's reign and Charles's court. Zara listened, but the request disturbed her because it treated private affection as ceremonial property. The timing had been deliberate. Zara chose a gathering attended by Charles, William, Anne, and senior family members so the gift could not later be reversed, softened, or reinterpreted behind closed doors. Catherine finally held the box against her chest. Every face turned toward the king. Charles said nothing, yet his expression revealed that he already understood why Zara had acted and what Camilla had done to provoke it. But to understand why one emerald brooch could divide a room so completely, the personal stakes carried by Zara, Catherine, Camilla, and Charles must first be exposed. To the public, the brooch was a beautiful inheritance. Inside the family, it represented four competing versions of loyalty. For Zara, it was her grandmother's memory. For Catherine, it was a responsibility she had never demanded. For Camilla, it was recognition she believed had been withheld. And for Charles, it was another painful test of whether protecting his wife now meant challenging the wishes and emotions of the family he was born to lead. Zara's bond with Elizabeth had never depended on ceremony. The late Queen had watched her ride, celebrated her sporting victories, and treated her less like a royal asset than a deeply loved granddaughter. That difference mattered because the emerald brooch was tied to private affection rather than official rank. Giving it away meant surrendering something no title, collection, or public duty could replace. Catherine carried a different burden. She had become the woman expected to represent continuity beside William, and eventually help shape the monarchy's next reign. The Princess of Wales was the wife of the heir and a future queen, but the brooch signaled more than status. It suggested personal trust in her character, restraint, and ability to carry Elizabeth's memory forward without turning it into spectacle. Zara felt the loss only after the handover. Alone in the corridor, she pressed her palm against the closed velvet box before finally releasing it. The gesture exposed the grief beneath her certainty. She had defended her grandmother's wishes, yet doing so required giving up the last private connection she could still hold. Camilla experienced the same moment as rejection. The Queen had spent decades serving beside Charles, surviving scrutiny, and waiting for acceptance to become complete. Yet the brooch seemed to confirm that the family still separated the crown she wore from the affection Elizabeth inspired. Her position was official. Her belongings still felt conditional. Catherine had known nothing about the gift. Zara had deliberately kept both her and William uninformed, because she feared they would refuse it to prevent conflict. The prince later understood why, but the secrecy left him powerless to prepare his wife for the emotional weight placed in her hands. Charles understood Zara's reasoning privately, yet he also knew the decision had wounded Camilla. When she left the gathering, the king remained behind. He hesitated between following his wife and acknowledging the family's pain. Camilla noticed that pause, and the silence cut deeper than any spoken defense. Zara's decision had not formed that morning. It had been shaped weeks earlier during a memorial discussion, when one request transformed discomfort into resistance. That hidden conversation became the point of no return, because Camilla did not simply ask to borrow the brooch. She spoke, as though its destination had already been decided. The dispute began 3 weeks earlier, in a small Windsor sitting room, during what was supposed to be a respectful discussion about a memorial portrait of Queen Elizabeth. No cameras were present. No public announcement was planned. Yet one sentence altered the mood instantly. Camilla looked toward Zara and referred to the emerald brooch as something that would naturally return to the queen. Zara did not answer, but the way she closed her notebook told everyone the conversation had crossed a line. Zara had joined Anne, Catherine, Camilla, and a royal curator to discuss which personal jewels might appear in an exhibition honoring Elizabeth's private life and reign. A royal curator was the specialist responsible for preserving, recording, and presenting historic objects connected to the monarchy. The meeting mattered because it would determine whether the late queen's possessions were remembered as intimate family treasures or absorbed into the public image of the new court. The curator clarified that the emerald brooch had been placed among Elizabeth's personal family items. It had not been assigned automatically to the reigning consort, meaning the wife of the monarch. Its future use, therefore, depended on the relatives entrusted with those private belongings, not simply on Camilla's title. The queen challenged that boundary. She suggested Zara release the jewel before the exhibition, so she could wear it at an upcoming Commonwealth reception. The Commonwealth was the voluntary association of nations, linked by shared history and cooperation, and its royal events carried enormous symbolic weight. Camilla argued that seeing the brooch on the reigning queen would settle doubts about continuity. Zara slowly put down her pen. She asked whether the memorial was meant to honor her grandmother or strengthen Camilla's position. Anne turned toward her daughter, but did not intervene. The Princess Royal understood that Zara's controlled anger had already replaced politeness. Catherine tried to calm the room. She said the brooch did not need to be worn by anyone, and could remain protected within the exhibition. Camilla heard strategy rather than peace. The queen asked whether Catherine had already been promised the jewel, forcing the princess to deny knowledge of an arrangement that did not yet exist. The meeting ended without agreement. Near the doorway, Camilla told Zara that personal sentiment could not be allowed to interfere with the needs of the crown. Zara answered, "That depends on whose crown you mean." Neither woman withdrew the words. That evening, Zara called Princess Anne and asked whether giving the brooch to Catherine would honor Elizabeth's judgment or merely ignite a family war. Anne did not command her daughter to act. She said only that inherited trust meant nothing unless someone was willing to defend it. Anne's answer did not command Zara to act, but it gave her the courage to confront Camilla, and that confrontation would soon unfold without courtesy, distance, or escape. The confrontation came minutes after the brooch entered Catherine's hands. Camilla caught Zara in a narrow drawing room passage and ordered the door closed behind them. There were no aides, no courtiers, and no smiling relatives to soften what followed. Camilla accused her of staging a humiliation. Zara stepped closer, refusing to lower her voice, and answered with the sentence that shattered any remaining restraint. "You asked for her memory as though it already belonged to you." Camilla demanded an explanation. She said the handover had been designed to wound her in front of Charles and the wider family, and she argued that Zara could have transferred the jewel privately if her intentions were innocent. The Queen believed the public setting had turned a family decision into a verdict on her place within the monarchy. Zara refused that interpretation. She explained that privacy would have allowed palace officials to describe the brooch as a temporary loan, a ceremonial arrangement, or a misunderstanding that could later be reversed. A private family possession was an heirloom held personally rather than by the official crown collection. She wanted every witness to understand that Catherine had received it permanently. Camilla's anger then cracked. She admitted that Elizabeth had never given her a personal jewel carrying the same warmth and recognition. The Queen said she had spent years standing beside a family that still measured her against its dead, and the brooch had seemed like one chance to prove she was more than a tolerated wife wearing an inherited title. Zara heard the sadness but would not surrender. She acknowledged Camilla's pain and said it deserved honesty, not mockery. Yet grief could not be healed by claiming an object loved by someone else. She would not apologize for protecting what she believed was her grandmother's emotional legacy. Camilla invoked Charles. She warned that the king could review how royal jewels were allocated and overturn a decision that threatened family unity. Zara answered that the emerald piece had never belonged to the institutional collection. It could not be reassigned through protocol simply because the outcome embarrassed the reigning queen. Catherine reached the closed door, as Camilla said Zara had placed her in an impossible position. The princess entered, heard enough to understand the damage, and offered to return the brooch immediately. Zara took the box, pressed it firmly back into her hands, and refused to let guilt reverse the decision. A footman arrived before anyone could speak again. Charles wanted Zara, Camilla, and Catherine in his private library at once. The dispute was no longer confined to grief or resentment. Royal authority was about to enter the argument. Yet when Charles faced the three women together, he discovered that kingship could control protocol, but it could not easily command memory, loyalty, or love. Charles sat behind the library desk with the emerald box placed exactly between him and Catherine. He could have ended the dispute with a single instruction. Instead, he removed his glasses, folded them carefully, and asked everyone to explain what the brooch meant to them. The question surprised Camilla, unsettled Zara, and brought Catherine close to tears. Because the king was no longer deciding who could wear a jewel, he was deciding which kind of loyalty his reign would defend. Charles knew his authority had limits. The brooch was a private family possession, meaning it belonged to Elizabeth's personal legacy rather than the crown's ceremonial inventory. That distinction mattered because the king could direct the use of official royal jewels, but he could not simply seize an intimate heirloom and reassign it as though affection were part of palace protocol. Anne had defended that boundary for years, preserving the difference between institutional treasures and objects carrying personal family meaning. Her judgment gave Zara's gift moral weight. The king turned toward Camilla and asked why she had approached Zara before the memorial exhibition. His wife answered without evasion. She believed that appearing in the emerald brooch would show the public that Elizabeth's legacy and her own queenship were not enemies. Camilla had not wanted to erase the late queen. She had wanted one visible sign that the family's past had accepted its present. Catherine could no longer bear the pressure. She placed the box on the desk and said she would surrender the jewel rather than become the center of another royal division. William remained near the fireplace, watching her with quiet distress. The prince wanted to protect his wife, but he allowed her to speak because he understood that taking over the moment would make her seem powerless. Zara then recalled something Elizabeth had once told her during a private family conversation recorded in her own journal. Jewels should never be used to force affection that had not been freely given. Charles reacted immediately. He knew the phrase. The monarch had heard his mother use those exact words years earlier, when another family heirloom had caused resentment. The decision became unavoidable. Charles pushed the velvet box back toward Catherine and declared that Zara had the right to make the gift. He would not reverse it. Palace records would describe the brooch as a permanent personal transfer, not a temporary royal loan. Camilla did not argue. She rose, looked directly at her husband, and asked whether he had chosen Elizabeth's memory over his living wife. Then she left before he could answer. Charles's ruling settled the ownership, but it unleashed a more dangerous consequence. Camilla now believed the rejection had been endorsed not only by Zara, but by her own husband. The first sound after Camilla left the library was not a voice, but the heavy click of the door closing behind her. Within minutes, the palace divided into uneasy camps. Some saw Zara's action as a defense of Elizabeth's private wishes. Others feared the gift had publicly weakened the Queen Consort. But the deepest damage was unfolding away from the argument, where Camilla sat alone and removed the reception schedule she had planned around wearing the emerald brooch. Palace staff moved quickly. The wardrobe notes for the upcoming Commonwealth reception were rewritten, and every reference to the emerald piece disappeared. A Commonwealth reception was an official gathering connected to the group of nations historically linked to the crown. Camilla's team replaced the disputed jewel with a neutral brooch already associated with her, hoping routine could conceal the crisis. It could not. The change itself confirmed that the decision was final. William protected Catherine before speculation could harden. He instructed the communications office not to suggest that his wife had requested, negotiated for, or expected the gift. The prince wanted the palace record to state clearly that Zara had acted independently. Catherine repeated the same position privately, refusing to let Camilla believe she had engineered the humiliation from behind closed doors. The queen reached her sitting room and removed her earrings with shaking hands. She told her dresser to cancel the final fitting. When the woman asked whether she felt unwell, Camilla answered, "No. I have simply understood my place." Her voice remained calm, but the words revealed a collapse deeper than anger. She no longer saw the brooch as lost jewelry. She saw it as proof that affection within the family still had limits. Charles stopped outside her door. The king heard movement inside, rested his hand against the frame, and almost knocked. Then an aide approached, and he walked away. His silence protected neither of them. It only made the distance more visible. Anne confronted him soon afterward. She said reversing or disguising Zara's gift would confirm every fear her daughter held about private possessions being absorbed into palace politics. The Princess Royal warned that protecting Camilla from embarrassment could not mean erasing the meaning of Elizabeth's personal choices. Catherine made one final decision. She would not wear the brooch at the Commonwealth reception. Debuting it so soon would appear triumphant and deepen the Queen's humiliation. Yet Camilla did not interpret the restraint as kindness. She suspected the future queen was saving the jewel for a more powerful moment. The queen therefore asked to meet Catherine alone. That private meeting would finally remove the brooch, the crown, and the palace machinery from the center of the conflict, leaving only two women confronting what they had come to represent. Catherine found Camilla in the garden room shortly before dusk, seated beside an untouched tray of tea. No private secretary stood nearby. Charles had not arranged the conversation, and Zara did not know it was happening. Catherine placed the closed emerald box on the table, but did not push it forward. Camilla looked at it, then at the woman who would one day occupy her position, and asked the question beneath every previous argument. "Have you all been waiting for me to fail?" Catherine answered carefully. She had requested privacy because any meeting arranged by Charles would feel like mediation, while the presence of staff would turn every sentence into part of the palace record. A palace record was the official written account of decisions and conversations considered important to royal business. She wanted no official version, no witnesses, and no one shaping their words before either woman could speak honestly. The brooch remained inside its box. Neither woman reached for the clasp, because both understood that possession was no longer the true conflict. The jewel now represented acceptance, succession, and belonging. It raised a painful question: could affection for Catherine exist without becoming a rejection of Camilla? The Queen finally admitted what she feared. Catherine's popularity, her connection to Elizabeth, and her future beside William made Camilla feel temporary. She worried that the family saw her as someone merely holding a place the princess would inherit more naturally. The confession carried no anger now, only exhaustion. Catherine refused the rivalry. She said she had never wanted Camilla's humiliation, but she could not reject every act of affection because others might interpret it as judgment against the reigning queen. Doing so would turn kindness into guilt, and force every family memory to pass through fear. Then the princess made a promise. She would not wear the emerald brooch as a weapon, a victory symbol, or a comparison. Its first appearance would be at a family-led event, honoring Elizabeth's charitable legacy, with Zara present. The occasion would celebrate service, not succession, and the jewel would remain tied to the woman who had loved it. Camilla touched the box, but did not open it. She admitted that asking for the brooch before Zara was ready had turned grief into a contest she could never win. The queen could not erase the hurt, but she could stop demanding that others repair it for her. She told Catherine she would attend the memorial event and stand beside her when the brooch was worn. Not because the rejection no longer wounded her, but because she refused to let that wound define the monarchy. Their agreement remained private, but the world outside the palace had already discovered the gift, and one image would transform a family disagreement into a national verdict. By sunrise, the emerald brooch was no longer a family secret. A photograph taken through the open doorway at Windsor showed Zara fastening Catherine's fingers around the velvet box, while Camilla stood in the background beside an empty chair. The image appeared across television screens and newspaper covers within hours. To some, it was a tender transfer between Elizabeth's granddaughter and the future queen. To others, it was the clearest proof yet that Camilla remained outside the monarchy's deepest emotional circle. The palace responded with extreme care. Officials confirmed only that Zara had given Catherine a privately held family brooch, meaning the jewel belonged to Elizabeth's personal legacy rather than the official collection controlled by the crown. They refused to discuss Camilla's earlier request. That silence did not calm the story. It sharpened it, because every missing detail invited the public to create its own explanation. Commentators quickly divided. Some called the gift a simple act of affection between two women connected by Elizabeth's memory. Others saw a deliberate endorsement of Catherine's future beside William. A third group believed Zara had openly resisted the current queen's attempt to shape how the late monarch's private legacy would be carried forward. Zara watched the coverage at home and slammed the television remote onto the table. She had wanted the transfer witnessed by family, so it could not be reversed. But she had never wanted her grandmother's memory reduced to a national spectacle. The public praise offered no comfort. It made the grief feel exposed. Catherine feared the same coverage would wound Camilla again. Before speaking with palace staff, the princess called her privately and repeated that neither she nor William had released the photograph. The queen listened, then reminded her of their agreement. If they allowed suspicion to control what came next, the brooch would become exactly the weapon both women had promised to reject. The defining public moment arrived on a London newspaper's front page. "The brooch chooses the future," appeared above the Windsor photograph. Outside the castle, a small crowd gathered carrying emerald green ribbons and pictures of Elizabeth wearing the jewel. Their tribute was peaceful, yet its meaning was unmistakable. The public had already connected the brooch to succession. Camilla surprised everyone. She refused to demand a denial and approved a palace statement calling the gift a deeply personal act of family remembrance. The Queen also confirmed that she would attend the charitable memorial where Catherine planned to wear it for the first time. Public attention shifted instantly to that event. Whether the women stood together or apart would decide whether the emerald remained a symbol of rejection or became something more difficult and meaningful. When Catherine finally stepped forward wearing the emerald, the decisive moment was not the jewel catching the light, it was the person who chose to stand beside her. At the memorial event, Catherine entered wearing the emerald brooch over a dark green coat, with Zara walking several steps behind her. The room reacted exactly as expected until Camilla moved from her assigned position and stood beside Catherine for the official photograph. There was no embrace and no performance of sudden intimacy. Instead, Camilla looked at the brooch, then at Zara, and gave a small, deliberate nod. In that restrained gesture, the battle finally reached its end. Catherine had chosen the occasion carefully. The event supported one of Elizabeth's longest-held charitable causes, allowing the jewel to return through service rather than status. A memorial program was the official written guide, explaining the purpose, participants, and order of an event. This one recorded that the brooch was a personal gift from Zara in memory of her grandmother, ending all uncertainty about whether the transfer was temporary or open to reversal. Zara held herself together until the photograph was finished. Then she admitted quietly that seeing the emerald worn hurt more than she had expected. The gift had honored Elizabeth, but it had also made the loss permanent. Catherine took her hand and promised that the jewel would always be available to Zara's family whenever they wished to remember the late queen privately. The princess would protect its meaning, not treat it as a prize. Camilla reached her own truth beside Charles. She admitted that she had mistaken possession for acceptance. The brooch could never give her the affection she wanted, because affection could not be demanded through rank, ceremony, or inheritance. The queen still carried the humiliation of rejection, but she no longer believed the jewel could repair what years of insecurity had created. Charles accepted his part in the conflict. He told his wife that he should have confronted her fear before it attached itself to an heirloom. The king also spoke privately with Zara and assured her that defending Elizabeth's personal legacy was not an act of disloyalty to his reign. Her decision had hurt people, but it had preserved a boundary the family needed. Catherine then made the final choice. She would wear the brooch sparingly, and only at events connected to family service, unity, or Elizabeth's charitable memory. It would never become a routine symbol of rank or competition. Zara's rejection had been painful but necessary. It proved that royal titles could not automatically claim private love, personal memory, or inherited trust. Catherine received the emerald because Zara believed she would protect its meaning. Camilla's acceptance did not erase her humiliation, but it transformed defeat into dignity. The emerald brooch had passed into Catherine's care, Camilla had accepted the boundary, and Zara had preserved her grandmother's memory, bringing the conflict to a clear and final close. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.